What would happen if the son of the President of the United States fell in love with a British prince? We'll find out next with Red, White and Royal Blue, which was released on Prime Video. Katie Campione is our royal campaign reporter for this one.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Campione, a TV reporter at Deadline. Thank you for joining us for Deadline Contenders TV, The Nominees. Based on the best-selling novel, Red, White, and Royal Blue stars Taylor Zakhar Perez as Alex Claremont Diaz, the first son of the United States, and Nicholas Galitzine as British Prince Henry, who, as they fall in love, must keep their relationship a secret due to the public nature of their personas. The film is among Prime Video's 3 most-watched romantic comedies of all time, and much to fans' delight, it was recently announced that a sequel is underway. But first, the original Red, White, and Royal Blue is up for Outstanding Television Movie at the 76th Emmy Awards. With us today, we have producer Sarah Schechter, co-writer, director, and executive producer Matthew López, and star Taylor Zakhar Perez. Thank you for being here. Before we get started, let's watch a clip from the film. Taylor, I wanted to start with you. I've noticed you've talked previously about how you're very different from Alex, and I'm curious what made you pursue the role and what was the most challenging thing about getting into character.
I felt like I kind of had it easy getting into character because I was able to be very goofy on set. And though, this was Matthew's first time directing, he was able to get goofy with me as well. And so it kind of kept everything moving. I feel like where Nick sort of had to, bring it all back before we started each take. So we just were really goofy on set. So that was the best part about getting into Alex. And what made me pursue the role, somebody sent me the book before they started casting, and they said, read this. I think that you would kick ass at this. And I said, okay. So I read it and was just bawling on my flight back from New York. And then I said, oh, Meg, I have to meet on this. It's just so different. It was unlike any other queer romantic comedy that I've ever seen or heard about or read. And it just felt like there was way more depth, and there was so much more going on in the world than just the love story. They were high achieving people in this world, and you just were rooting for them and their future, and I just wanted to be a part of it.
For Matthew and Sarah, for both Taylor and Nicholas, when they were auditioning, what made you realize that they were perfect for the roles?
We saw a lot of people for these roles, and there was just something individually very special about them. They sort of vibrated at the same frequency as the character, and I knew that I had each of the roles cast. I thought maybe, and then I think Sarah can talk to their chemistry read, which was the last test that we had to put them through.
Yeah, I think that Nick emerged very quickly and felt very Henry. It's when you're casting, you're looking for just really talented actors who also have a sort of essence of the characters, as Matthew pointed out. And I think Taylor I like that it was Taylor, why you pursued the role. It's also we pursued you, because you sort of pursued it. And then and then we were no, we need you, Taylor, because I think Alex is very bubbly. He's really smart. He's really charming. He's very winning. And I think that's a quality that Taylor has. You want to spend time with him, and you want to be kind of in his energy, because Taylor's such a wonderful human being. And so in that way, I think he shared a lot with Alex. So for us, it was once we did the chem read, we definitely knew almost immediately, Matthew. I think we were texting within 45 seconds. I'm sure it lasted longer than that, but that's as much as we needed to see that Taylor and Nick would be perfect together. It was still very heavy COVID times, so Zoom chem reads, and so, of course, we weren't totally sure till Matthew was able to do rehearsals with them. And then when we started seeing dailies, we knew at that point.
And I think it was 4 months from the initial meeting to actually getting on set.
Yeah, we spent months and months casting this thing. And I think there's a period in which he sort of despaired of ever finding the right even forget just the individual. You had to cast a duo here, and that chemistry read was I think I was texting out of camera range on Zoom to Sarah. I'm like, this is them. We found them. The thing I loved about it is that Taylor talked about that sense of play. that we had on set, and I remember in their chemistry read, they were they were doing the scene for sure, but they were also kind of just playing around with each other, and they were improvising, and I remember thinking like, man, if they can improvise successfully as a team on Zoom, like I can't wait to get in a room with them and start actually working. So it for as much as Zoom will tell you something about chemistry, I think that really was just like, that was definitely a great advertisement for Zoom as
Yeah.
as a casting tool.
Matthew, I know you've said you really value that rehearsal process, especially coming from theater. And I'm curious how that rehearsal time with Nick and Taylor kind of helped shape the film, and if there were any particular scenes where you feel like they greatly benefited from that rehearsal time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it wasn't just a question of like looking at the text together and helping them find their characters. I knew that the process of filmmaking was so different from the process of making theater that they were going to have to many times, find the character on the fly, and we were going to have to find it together on set. So it was less a question of preparing the text, less a question of preparing the performances. And it was just giving the three of us an opportunity to understand how the other one works. I kind of needed them to have that time over lunch to just talk about whatever it was that, even if it was what they did the night before. And I think it was really helpful that we built a camaraderie, and the two of them sort of really came on set 2 weeks later knowing each other and trusting one another. And I think, my favorite scene between the two of them is the scene in Alex's bedroom after they hook up for the first time. And that I remember we played around with that in the rehearsal room, and we even staged it with some blocking. And I made a video of that. There was just something special about that scene. I think it was one of the most relaxed and lived in performances that either of them gave in the film.
Taylor, do you remember that scene?
I do.
And that process, what was it like for you?
I do. And I love how Matthew mentioned the play, because sometimes you get onto sets and you don't have that. It's very rigid and strict, and you lose a bit of that fun. The whole reason that we get into this business is because the feeling you get when you're doing it. And we're so lucky to be in rehearsals together going through this. Kensington Palace was one that we really went after like every day. And me and Nick were like, oh my God, again. And Matthew's like, you guys, this is the moment. This is the Everest moment.
I remember doing that with you guys too, because you were sort of like, we don't want to set it. We don't want to rehearse it too much. And I was like, it's not about setting it. It's about, by the time we get to this scene, it's going to be an old friend, and you're not going to even think about it. It was just sort of like getting those two actors to make friends with the text, so that by the time we get to it weeks later on set, it's in their muscles, it's in their bones. They recall it. They recall it rather than just have to find it on the day.
Yeah, you can really get in and do something different and play against the lines. And I think that's what Matthew really helped us do, was play against what we maybe thought that scene was. And so doing the first hookup scene and having that awkward but pleasantly surprised energy and the nerves, and it was kind of similar to me and Nick meeting, honestly, because we're just two people who have never met in person that now have to be extremely intimate with one another. And this, I think, was before Robbie Taylor Hunt came onto the scene. And it was kind of like, all right, it was the vibe of the room in a way. So then we kind of held on to that, because then when we grew as people, actors, and became friends, it kind of goes away. And you kind of have to lock back into the given circumstances and the relationship at that point in the film. And just remember, like, what genre you're in.
So the movie premiered almost a year ago today, and during that time, there was a lot of limited promo due to the actor strike, but somehow we're still here. We're still talking about it. It's up for an Emmy. Did you expect when it was released that it would have this kind of cultural impact?
I think we hope so. You never know, and you can't be too have too many expectations. But I think the book is so beloved, and the fans of the book are so adamant that it be sort of respected and loved and appreciated. And so I think that, like, it really started with Casey and their trust in us, and in myself, my producing partner Greg Berlanti, and in Matthew López to sort of adapt it. And I think we're all very conscious. I mean, when we were in prep, when Nick dyed his hair, he was looking at like fan art to make sure it was the right color. So I think that it's always, I mean, look, it's the best possible outcome is that people love the thing that you worked really hard on. But I think we really were conscientious from the beginning of trying to approach it as fans. And I think when you approach something as a fan, when you approach it as something that you love, it's contagious, that love. And I think we're just really grateful. But I think it's really the fans of the movie that are that's the reason why. I mean, people just really loved it. I've talked to so many people who've watched it multiple times. I mean, no one's watched it as much as Matthew, but like
at this point, I don't know if that's true anymore.
Yeah, I know it might not be true.
I don't know if that's true.
But it really it has embedded itself into culture in a way that's beyond our wildest dreams, and I think it offers a lot of hope. And I think that's what the world needs more of these days.
When I signed on to this project and reading it going, oh, if it made me feel this way, I wonder how it's going to make millions and millions of people feel. And I've never signed on to a project going, oh man, this is going to be nominated for an Emmy. This is going to be nominated for an Academy Award. You know what I mean? And so this is sort of like the gift that keeps on giving, because we all got into this for the right reasons, because we knew what it represented, what it represents, and what it could do to a new generation of young people. And I think that has been incredible to see that response. And I'm sure just Casey is over the moon about it.
Matthew and Sarah, I wanted to ask you about that development process on the first movie with Casey, and taking their ideas from the book and transforming them into a film. And if you could touch also on how maybe that collaborative process is adapting with the sequel now that there's no source material to draw from.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of piggyback on the last answer as well, to answer this is, when we were starting this process, I kept saying, like, we'll have succeeded at this adaptation if the movie feels the same way the book felt. If you feel the same way at the end of the film as you felt finishing the book. I really went into the adaptation process in love with the book myself. I mean, I knew that there were, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of fans of the book to sort of please and to not disappoint, but I was one of them. And so I had so much fun just sort of taking the book and imagining it as a film. And so as we're making the sequel, yeah, you're right. There's no book to guide us, but what we have is Casey's original thoughts and original ideas. And we have a collaboration that we didn't have on the first one, only except for me and Casey's words. And so that Casey's actually in the room now, that Casey's lifting the pen and writing. It's been so much fun, and it feels like watching a new book be written, except for it's going to be a screenplay instead.
Taylor, I just want to end with you and ask what you're looking forward to about revisiting this character in this world.
Ooh, Alex just kind of has no rules. Even though he comes from a blue collar family and doesn't come from money and is like really a man of the people, he now is in this extraordinary circumstance and can kind of have whatever he wants, be with whoever he wants, and dream whatever he wants. And I'm excited about that. He just is has an endless waterfall of optimism rushing over him at all times. And he has just nonstop positivity. So I think I'm excited to bring that back to the screen, because I think the state of the world right now, we could use a little bit more of that.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Television movies have evolved over the years, especially with streaming films expanding the field in recent years. That's how you get winners as diverse as Black Mirror and Weird. Here are this year's 2024 nominees: The Great Lillian Hall, Mr. Monk's Last Case, No One Will Save You, Quiz Lady, Red, White, and Royal Blue. And the winner of the GoldDerby TV Award goes to Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Thank you so much for this award. We made this movie with love, and we are so grateful for the love that it's received in the year since we've premiered it. Thank you, Amazon, for taking a chance on me. Thank you to Greg Berlanti and Sarah Schechter for having my back the entire time. Our amazing cast, led by Taylor and Nick. And Casey McQuiston, of course, thank you for writing the most wonderful book to be able to adapt and turn into a film. And most especially, a lot of love and thanks to the fans of this movie. The thing we became in the world is because the people who fell in love with it and really championed our film, and we're very grateful to them for that. So thanks.
Red, White, and Royal Blue won with more votes than the next three nominees combined. No One Will Save You was second. Mr. Monk's Last Case came in third.
I'm Daniel Montgomery, here for our Making of Red, White, and Royal Blue panel to discuss the Prime Video romantic comedy about the love affair between a British prince and the son of the President of the United States. I'm joined by producer Sarah Schechter, co-writer, director, and executive producer Matthew López, and actor Taylor Zakhar Perez, who plays Alex Claremont Diaz. Now, the film is an Emmy nominee for Best TV Movie. What does that recognition, first of all, mean to the three of you? Start with Sarah.
It's wonderful. I'm so grateful to the Academy and to just for all the hard work that everyone put into it. It's really nice.
Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very lovely bow on the top of what has already been a very wonderful gift. And it's just so nice that people thought enough of this movie to nominate it, and feels a little like the little engine that could in some ways. So I'm very happy.
And Taylor?
Sort of like the gift that keeps on giving, and I'm so grateful for it.
Now, the film is based on the popular novel by Casey McQuiston, of course. What were your experiences reading it? Taylor?
Okay, I feel like I've told this story too many times, but I just sobbed.
I love this story.
I was on my way to New York City, and I read the first part on the way there, and then on my way home, I was just bawling, and I just was like, "Do you just cry more when you're on the plane? Maybe that's the altitude. I don't know." And you do. I know that's a fact.
You do. That's scientific. So
I chalked it up to that.
Blame science, Taylor. Yeah.
But then
it wasn't your fault.
I kept thinking about it and just how wonderful a story and how strong these characters were, and it was a great read.
Matthew?
It was in early 2020. My agent had sent it to me thinking I might want to turn it into a musical. I remember reading it. I was actually in a workshop of Some Like It Hot, this other musical, and I was like on my sofa in upstate New York, and I read it in about a day and a half, and I just couldn't put it down. And I love everything that Taylor loved about it. I love these characters and the story and the sort of the impossible nature of it. And I knew that I had read something really special, and I wanted to be a part of it if I could.
Sarah?
I read it before it was published, and my Mike McGrath, who's an executive producer on the film, had read it first and sort of came into my office and was like, "This is really special. It's also very steamy, so I'm not sure I want to email you about the details of the plot, but you need to read this." And then Greg Berlanti and I both read it and really just fell in love with it. And it's really the magic of Casey McQuiston and what they wrote and the world they created, the hope they created, and the love that they sort of generated that was why we're all here.
And Sarah, you as you mentioned, Greg Berlanti, your producing partner. How do you two of you choose projects to work on in general?
Great question. It's really case. What's great, I think we both have really diverse taste and overlapping taste, but are also supportive of anything I think either of us really love. But I think that's what it comes from. It's just a story we really want to tell, be a part of, that feels entertaining and fun, but has like heart and humor and really just can connect with the human condition.
And Taylor, what excited you about the role of Alex? What stood out in the book and then in the script?
Yeah, I think what stood out in the book was that he was such a dynamic character that you kind of didn't know what was going to happen next. I think he was incredibly intelligent, and that kind of scared me. But I loved The West Wing, and for some reason, he just reminded me of like a Sam Seaborn character, that Rob Lowe character, and that kind of it was almost like Sorkin writing in a character in Alex, and I think I look at roles and I kind of just do like a little litmus test of like, does this make me feel uncomfortable when I'm reading and creating this character in my head? Like, is it scary? Is it going to challenge me? And with Alex, I'm like, oh man, I wonder if I can think as fast as Alex. Can I be as quick on my feet as this guy? And hopefully I did. And I also just loved that he was so open with everything. Like he was like, I think something that we share is like, I'll try anything twice. Like I always joke about that. Like when it comes to food, I think it's disgusting the first time, I'll try it again because I'm like, hey, you never know, you can have a new experience. And with him, I think he's like that. He's like, I will try it as many ways as possible until it works. And he was just so contagious. I felt his energy was. And if like we could have someone like Alex in the public eye, in the White House as the first son, then I think America could be a pretty sweet place.
I think luckily Taylor has more charisma than Alex, so that's really where we
Oh my gosh.
Casey McQuiston is also an executive producer of the film. What was it like working with her or working with them? Sorry, adapting their work for the screen, Matthew.
Well, Casey, it's funny. Like Casey did me the great favor, and possibly paid me the great compliment of leaving me alone for a while, which is what I think I needed in order to adapt this book at first, because there was such it felt like a high wire act. And I knew that there were so many legions of passionate fans, and I didn't want to disappoint them, but I also didn't want to disappoint Casey. And it's like, as a playwright, there's always a period when you're in rehearsals where it's best that you as a playwright leave, because it just gets ugly for a while, and it has to go through that ugly phase in order to get into the pretty phase again and the happy place. And I think in any adaptation, there's that thing. It's just sort of like, I remember writing some things, and I'm like, boy, I'm glad Casey's never going to see this, because it's going to be great by the time I send it to them. It has been tremendous to then share the script with Casey the first time I ever emailed it to them, and get this overwhelming response of of support, of happiness, and then of course the other fun thing was every time we cast one of the roles, because we were in the process of taking Casey's story away from them and turning it into something new, and it really was the casting process that enabled that transfer. And so these people who were just in Casey's mind as these characters, maybe without faces, then suddenly it's Uma Thurman, and it's Clifton Collins Jr., and it's Taylor, and it's Nick, and I had a lot of fun with Casey, sort of unveiling each cast reveal to them as it went, and then of course working on the sequel with Casey as a co-writer is also like the next level, because now I'm like in a room with them and we are concocting this story together. So it feels like throughout the whole process, we've just sort of grown closer, and this mind meld is happening, which is, great for now, but we'll have to sort of do some surgical separation at the end of the sequel writing.
Sarah, what was your collaboration with Casey like?
I mean, look, as a producer, having an author trust you enough to give you, of all the other producers that are knocking on their door, the permission and the trust to adapt their material is like honestly like the greatest and highest kind of compliment and honor, and I take it really seriously. So I think there was always a tremendous pressure to make sure that Casey was happy with what we were doing, and not contractually, but just like morally. And I think like Casey is awesome. I admire them so much. They're so smart. They're so talented, and they're very, very wise and really good at understanding, maybe because they write books, which is such like a long and depth process. Like they're really patient at moments where it's not right yet. They're always sort of keeping their eye on the North Star of what came out of their soul, but so Casey's a true joy to work with. Like really have had such an incredible and wonderful experience working with them and learning from them, and just also like having their faith and trust and friendship is amazing.
Taylor, were you able to discuss your character with them to get a fuller sense of Alex?
I wasn't. I met Casey probably the last week or two of filming the movie in London. They came for our electronic press kit day, and I think we took some Polaroids with them and got to hang out for maybe an hour. And so Alex and Henry were kind of set by the time I got to meet them. And we all asked about him the entire time, waiting, when's Casey coming? When's Casey coming? And I wish we would have been introduced sooner, but as you know, on a film set, on a TV set, it's so chaotic that there really is no personal time to have, no downtime. And I really think that Matthew's adaptation, I think he really captured the essence of these characters and kept the heart of these characters. And personally, I didn't want any confusion with what Matthew's adaptation was with Casey's original creation. I just wanted to trust that Matthew adapted it properly, and I think that he did.
And Matthew
Also that, but sorry,
just
to say, like, I love, and Matthew, I know you remember this too, like when Casey came to set, the look on their face when they saw Henry and Alex, like when they like these, like, can you imagine? It's like your imaginary friend is now standing in front of you. It was truly one of the most like satisfying and happy moments of the whole production, was just watching Casey see these boys that they had created standing in front of them. I mean, it was,
yeah.
And how pleased Casey was, I think also, Matthew, I think that carried us through the whole end of production.
Yeah, it was definitely the sort of visiting dignitary day, and it was I was actually grateful that it happened later in production, because what Casey ended up seeing was a group of people who knew the characters in some ways as well as Casey did, and the thing that is true is that the characters are so clear on the page in the book that the multiple acts of adaptation of writing a script and rewriting a script and then casting it and then giving the script to the actor. By the time the movie comes out, you're lucky if it bears even a passing resemblance to the originating work. And I think it's a real testament to how vibrant that book is and how clear as a bell each character that Casey has invented seemed to be, and cuts across layers and layers and layers of process to stay intact the way that they did in this film.
Also, Matthew cast Casey in a very clever cameo.
I did.
Ellen as Uma's speechwriter. So there, the scene, the election night, Casey's actually in the film, sitting next to Uma, which is pretty
as Ellen the speechwriter, which we thought was a nice full circle thing.
I think I mentioned to Casey, I said, if you were on set the whole time, would you have felt like when you're bowling and the ball is kind of moving, and you know when you kind of turn your body like this after you bowl, like you kind of just, you want it to hit the pin properly? I said, do you think you would have been like that the entire summer? And they said, no, I have so much trust in what is on the page and what everyone created, that I really just gave it over. So that was, put a lot of faith.
It says a lot about Matthew too. And Matthew really spent a lot of time on that relationship. And Casey, I think, just intuitively knew that they could trust him.
Now, Red, White, and Royal Blue is a same-sex love story, and it's queer in such a matter-of-fact way that I don't think would have been made 20 or maybe even 10 years ago. Like, how meaningful is that to you, Matthew?
Well, I mean, it's queerness, and its essential itness is inextricably linked. The story doesn't work without these two characters, and the story doesn't work without it being a queer love story. And I love that it's that the queerness can't be erased from it and still have the thing be intact. I grew up at the beginning of the sort of the dawn of queer stories being told in Hollywood. I remember, My Own Private Idaho when it came out. I remember Philadelphia when that came out. I remember I was in college when Will and Grace came out. So that it feels as though like my childhood into adulthood into my creative life has sort of been witnessing and then ultimately participating in this evolution. And so I think a lot of it is, a lot of credit goes to Greg Berlanti, who has spent his career telling these stories, and to Greg and Sarah for championing this book in particular. I do think that ultimately, yeah, you're right. This particular kind of movie in this particular way would not have been made 10 years ago. I also think that I was standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who sort of built that foundation. Time was right for it, and I think that I'm sort of optimistic that there's no going back from that. I don't think that once you've achieved a degree of openness and honesty and sort of like totality of queerness in storytelling on a sort of a big budget, sort of macro scale, like we were able to do with this film, that you don't go backwards. And so that to me is what's most meaningful.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think, and yes, thinking back to Greg fighting for a same-sex kiss on Dawson's Creek, and how far the world has come, being pushed forward by Greg, I think is very inspiring. And I think everything Matthew said is so true and so right. Also, I'll just say Amazon has been incredible. Jen Psaki and her team, this is the second queer love story film that we've made at Amazon, and they've been wonderfully, wonderfully supportive this whole time. And for me, I just feel like everyone deserves to see themselves in stories. And I think that's, and it's also good storytelling, because these are fresher stories. They haven't been told as much. And I think they're universal. Emotions are universal. And so I think in that way, it just was great. But again, and really Matthew was so clear about the authenticity of the story he wanted to tell, and really kind of fought for that. Fought for it in the sense of had a really clear vision, and really wanted to be matter of fact in a way that he hadn't seen a lot, and he was so articulate about it, and we were able to achieve it, and really grateful again that we were able to.
Yeah, I will. I have to say that it's really interesting that the creative differences of opinion in the making of this film was never about the thing that you would imagine on a film like this. It was never about, oh, can we tone it down? Oh, can we, there's too many kisses in this thing. Oh, the sex scene is too explicit. Da, 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 da. It was treated like any other movie in that, like, oh, we disagree on the length of that scene. Oh, we disagree on, can we come to it? We don't think this scene is working. It was treated like any other movie by the studio and by the producers, and its queerness never really ever factored into the notes. That's not what we were wrangling over as we were making this film.
Taylor?
Yeah, I feel like this project to me represents, and I'm hopefully to the people that love it too, is a positive representation of queer love at the highest level. And seeing the President of the United States and the King of England accept their queerness and their love and their relationship, it just has a trickle-down effect. And for years, I've read projects sent romantic comedies, queer stories, but nothing that ever felt like it could really make an impact that had a positive influence on the culture. Somebody always died. Somebody was always affected somehow. And you really left those films going, oh my gosh, like I just feeling compassion for, those characters. But with this movie, you feel optimism, positivity, excitement, excitement for their future. And they're also really high achieving individuals, and they're not being represented as people that don't have agency. And to me, I think the more of this type of representation we can have of characters on screen for everybody, I think kids will be growing up thinking of themselves in a different way, and that's really exciting, and I can't wait for that.
I'm wondering if the three of you have particular scenes that stand out to you from the film that were your favorites to shoot, or once you saw the finished product that really excited you about the finished film. What about you, Matthew?
I mean, I really still am madly in love with Taylor and Nick's work in that scene in Alex's bedroom after they hook up for the first time. Their chemistry together in that scene is just so heaven sent. And I remember like showing Sarah and Greg and Mike a cut of the film, and the question came back, is like, is the scene too long? Is it too long? And we, oh yeah, maybe it is, but oh God, how would you get rid of any of this stuff? That I think is just as a director, I'm just so proud of them and their work. I think my favorite day of shooting was at V&A, when we had the great pleasure of taking over that museum in the middle of the night and shooting with just the two of them. The magic of what was in the book sort of was the magic of filming there, literally sneaking into that museum. And then the other thing I would have to say is that like election night was such a fun night, fun scene to shoot, because we conceived of it as this oneer. We called it our 1917 scene, and we shot it all in one take. And then when I started to screen the film, I realized it was just a little too, there was no urgency there. So we started cutting it up and doing the split screen stuff because I just needed to push the urgency. I remember showing the film to Steven, and Steve was like, what have you done to our magnificent shot? What have you done? This elegant tracking, this 7.5-minute tracking shot. And I was like, yeah, that's post-production for you, Steven. Those are my big three.
Taylor?
Oof. I've always been a fan of Uma Thurman, growing up watching Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, and I think that made me the most nervous, was awaiting Uma's arrival to set. And I know we had a handful of scenes together, and just getting that relationship solidified in a rehearsal, right? Like a 10-minute rehearsal. It's like, all right, let's do this. So I really loved the scene where Alex is being reprimanded because he gave a statement about flipping Texas, and I love when he goes toe to toe with his mom. And as Taylor, it's like going toe to toe with Uma Thurman. And it's like everything I could have ever imagined as an actor having this experience. And then even watching it, I still get like uncomfortable, like my shoulders raise for some reason. And I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God. And so I mean, I really don't like rewatching myself because it takes a long time for it to feel normal and go, okay, for me to stop judging it. But my scenes with Uma, and then obviously the being in the Oval Office with Uma and him, Alex telling him his mom that he's in love with this prince and her full acceptance. And I think when we were filming it, there was just such like a calm feeling over the set. And I think Matthew and I were like, this is the scene that is going to change so many kids' lives and is going to help so many parents approach that conversation in a different way to make their kid feel loved and accepted and not other. And that was such a huge moment. And so I think that the scenes with Alex and Ellen were so strong. And then like for the fun stuff, I mean, I loved the V&A. I loved the cake scene. I just love, I don't know, when we shot in the city of London, I love the progression of Alex becoming more and more inebriated before he gets to I think Matthew cut that so well. Just his little antics that he gets up to. And the scale of that room and the scale of the costumes and everything just felt so rich and it was so deep and I loved it and then finally when the cake falls on us, it's just so much fun.
Sarah?
I mean, I think they kind of hit a lot of my highlights. I do think the election night was so fun. And most of the cast was there. So that was, that was just like so fun to have everyone together. And then obviously look, any scene where you have a woman as the president in a White House Oval Office is a good scene to be a part of.
Sarah, I was actually just thinking about that because it's like that scene with Alex and his mom that Taylor referred to. One of the reasons I wrote that scene is very different from how it appears in the book, and I was like, you know what? I just want a female president who understands, who's like cool about, not just cool with, but like cool about like gay shit. And like what is important to and what are the sort of the minutia of the lives of gay men. And like I really wanted that scene to sort of feel like world's coolest president. And it just felt like fiction for so long. And now I'm sitting here going, maybe in under 100 days we can get
we should have put her. Yeah, we should have put her in a bedazzled rainbow jean jacket. I mean, we really missed it.
Basically, I think the sequel is just going to be a collection of things we wish we could have done with the first movie. We're going to break the story here that the sequel is merely a collection of outtakes and like wish we could have done. And there's no real plot to the sequel. It's just going to be us screwing around for 2 hours.
Well, one last question I want to ask about the sequel. I know you all can't reveal very much about any plot certainly, but I'm wondering what you're looking forward to about revisiting these characters, Matthew.
Well, I'm in the process now of writing the sequel with Casey, and the first thing to say is that who gets to write a sequel to their first film? Like that's just like pinch me territory, beyond pinch me territory. It's so much fun. I was telling you, like, I remember, like, Taylor, you and I hadn't spoken for like a couple of weeks, or maybe even like a month had gone by, or 2 months had gone by. We hadn't communicated, and Taylor sent me a text like, "Are you alive?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he's like, "I just, are you good?" I'm like, and I felt like it was in that moment that because of writing this movie, I feel like I spent every day with Taylor because I'm writing Alex and I'm writing Henry and writing Ellen, and so. It's just like hanging out with old friends and like getting to the joy of writing the sequel, especially with Casey, is like A, you're hanging out with some old friends, and B, kind of like get to just sort of put them on a new adventure that didn't exist before we started writing the sequel. So yeah, sorry Taylor, I haven't texted in a while. I've just been with you every day, it feels like.
That's right, that suffices.
And it happens.
I want to thank all of you for joining me today to discuss Red, White, and Royal Blue. Fingers crossed for the Emmys, of course, coming up in about a month's time. And Taylor, go flip Texas for us.
Texas, all right. I'm gonna head down there.
Did you see that meme, Taylor? You sent me that meme too, about like the Harris campaign is putting Texas on the might win, like we're gonna flip Texas, and it was like somebody read Alex's strategy memo.
Yes. Wait, I have it. It's right here. It's this one.
I will say I got to meet.
Yeah.
There you go. He read his Texas strategy. I will say I met Hillary Clinton recently, and she did say if every college age resident of Texas voted, we could flip Texas. So get out there.
Yeah. So
your lips to Texans' ears.
My dad is ready to send you down there right now, Taylor. He's like, my dad was like, is like, why isn't Taylor in Texas right now? I'm like, well, you got me.
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, Taylor, why aren't you in Texas right now?
Yeah, Taylor, why are you in Texas?
Sarah, keep flexing on Hillary Clinton meeting her over there. That's amazing.
That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I am Emily Longaretta, Senior TV Features Editor at Variety. Thank you all so much for being here. Today, we are going to have a lively conversation about Red, White, and Royal Blue, and we are very excited to be joined by producer Sarah Schechter, co-writer, director, and executive producer Matthew López, and of course, actor Taylor Zakhar Perez. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm very excited to talk all things Red, White, and Royal Blue. I want to kind of just dive in and start at the beginning of when you guys first were presented with this book, when you read it, and what your experience was. I know I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but Matthew, let's start with you and when you first read this book and why it was that it resonated with you.
Yeah, my agent sent it to me in early 2020 and thinking that I might want to turn it into a musical. And I read it and I was like, well, yeah, maybe, but let's talk about the movie. And that's how I found out that Greg and Sarah had the rights and they'd set it up on Amazon. And I basically just sort of like made a nuisance of myself with Sarah Schechter until, which really set the tone of our entire relationship, I think. And I basically shamelessly lobbied for the job. I loved the book from the moment I started reading it. I loved the characters. I loved Casey's writing. I loved everything about it. And I just knew I couldn't sleep until I got to make the film. And luckily, Sarah slipped me an Ambien and told me I had the job.
I love that. Go ahead, Sarah. How about you?
I did not drug him. Let's just.
No, she did not. No, I made that up. I made that up.
Yeah, no, I first heard about the book long before it was published. My exec, Mike McGrath, read it first and he came into my office. He's like, I read this book. He's like, I'm a little nervous to email you about it because it's kind of dirty. And he's like, so he's like, so it's like this great love story, but it's like very steamy. And so I can't really summarize all of it without like maybe breaking HR rules. And then I read it, Greg read it, we all like fell in love with it. And there were several parties sort of chasing Casey for the rights because it was so clearly just going to be a fantastic film if done well. And we were very lucky, and we teamed up with Amazon, and Casey ended up trusting us, which was incredible, and we're grateful to them forever for that. And Amazon was also just like so supportive and really understood immediately what it could be, and so they flew to Colorado to meet Casey, and so it was just like from the beginning we really were passionate and excited, and that was before the book became a big book. But it wasn't a surprise that it became a big book because it's just so fun and so good.
Yeah, for sure. And then Taylor, had you read it? Were you aware of it before you were cast?
I was
Our
unaware of it.
mutual friend.
Yes, our mutual friend sent me the book and said, you need to read this because they're going to start casting it. And I said, okay. So I read it on my way to New York and I was bawling flying home. And I said, okay, maybe I should, read on this project. And so I think that was January or February. And then I didn't wind up getting cast until mid-May of the same year. So, like as most actors do, we don't find out about projects until they're long underway into development. And so Matthew and Sarah, how many years did you guys have this before it was going to start going into production?
3 years, maybe.
3 years.
Well,
so
it started
nice
before COVID. So yeah, maybe 2019. I don't know. Taylor, it's a blur.
It all blurs.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's so many different methods to adapting a book at this point. Obviously, there's series and film, and Matthew, like you said, a musical. I mean, there's so many different options. What made the movie the right format? Like, what was it about this that you thought, like, maybe this is the right way to do it, rather than an episodic, rather than a musical first, like things like that?
Well, I think it was just so clearly it's such a beautiful beginning, middle, and end. And there is such a great conflict. And it needed the scale, I think, of a film. And, that so many of the obstacles are external. So it felt like film was the right format. But I mean, Matthew.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I came on, it was already a film. And I actually was very excited to find out that they wanted to turn it into a feature because yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think that there's just something that, like, it's reading it, thinking about it, it just sort of felt like if they don't make them like this anymore kind of a book. And I was hoping to make that kind of a film. There were days when I was adapting it that I was looking at all these things that I couldn't include, and I was wishing that maybe we were doing a limited series. But ultimately, there's something, I think, special about the limited time frame of a 2-hour film that you've got to just there's an urgency to it, and it makes things precious, and ultimately there's no other way that any of us would want to have made it other than as a feature.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that there is such a constrained time, because there's not one scene that's like a fluff scene that you could just like, oh, I'm gonna run to the bathroom. Like, no, there's none of that. Like, every scene you want to watch, which is an important part of making a good film. Let's talk a little about casting, because I know it kind of started with Nick Galantine. So like, what can you talk about kind of the process, Sarah and Matt, about finding him first and kind of building it, and why he was the right Henry?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with 2 brilliant casting directors, an American and a Brit, because it was such a sort of mixed cast. And we read a lot of people, which is sort of a process that I learned from television. And but it was Greg Berlanti was like, hey, that guy Nick, the one that was the prince in the Amazon Cinderella movie, that's the guy. And so it's sort of like, hey, we brought Nick in yet? And they're like, oh no, he's self-taping now. And I had known Nick had read for me, like, when the first time he ever came to LA, and I was like, oh, this kid's really special. But sometimes when you're casting, you kind of clock actors, and someday, like, they're not right for this part, but there's definitely going to be something for them, and they will definitely be, they're going to be a star. So that's how I felt about Nick. And so we were just really lucky. Once he came in, he seemed like, he seemed right, and I think we were pretty sure right away. But then finding Alex was much harder, because it's such a dynamic, external, charming, smart, and just had to be so many things. So I think British actors are sort of, it's in their blood to become princes, but I think to become an American prince it's harder. So we were, and then when Taylor and Nick read together is when we knew we had a movie. And it was just obvious within seconds. I think Matthew and I were texting each other. It was like, okay, good. Phew. Okay, let's go make the movie now. We got it.
Taylor, can you talk a little about your audition process?
Yeah. Well, what Sarah failed to mention was that I had auditioned for her for probably the last 7 years nonstop.
David never showed me your game.
ever. He always said,
"Yo, I'm just gonna step out of the room for a moment."
Yeah, I'll be right
But
back.
you should definitely keep the cameras going.
So finally, auditioning for Sarah and a project working just like this.
By the way, barely. You were so busy making movies in South Africa. You were
Yes,
as if
so busy. I think I had my first call with Matthew February, maybe sometime, and then like producer session maybe like March, and then
were you on the COVID audition that I was doing? I was like, there was this cohort of actors auditioning for this movie, and they were all having to put up with me hacking up a lung.
You're like in a little cottage, right? In like a little.
That you were one of the COVID calls. Yeah, okay.
And so it was like a 5-month process, and I want to say May, I was on the East Coast and I'm at my cousin's wedding, and David Rappaport calls me and he said, "Hey, Sarah Schechter wants to chat with you about this project." And I said, "Oh, I got auditioned for that so long ago." And like I met with Matthew, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, they're trying to find their Alex, and they want to talk to you. And I said, "Okay." So stepped out of my cousin's wedding, like legit. I think I might have missed, I now pronounce you husband and wife, because Matthew was in London, and I, just the timing, I was like, "You guys, I'm so sorry." So I had a great chat with Sarah, I had a great chat with Matthew, and then I flew back 2 days later and had the chem read with Nick on Zoom in my sister's apartment. I remember setting up my laptop on her kitchen island with like 4 books underneath it, and I was like, just be quiet. And then they said, "Hey, the next day, can you get to London like in 4 days?" I think it was like 3 days. Like, can you get there tomorrow?
Fast.
I was like,
it was very, very fast. We were trying to
I was like trying to get you to London without you going back to LA, but you were like, "I need things." And I was like, "I guess."
You did. I brought like 3 suitcases, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's such a whirlwind to hear this side of it, because for us as viewers, we see this amazing chemistry on screen. We see this story that looks like, oh, these two people have known each other for years. And I mean, by the time, we get into it, but I guess I'm curious what it was about, it's such a weird thing to say, Zoom chemistry read that worked, and that you guys had that chemistry, that Matt and Sarah, that you guys saw and were like, "Oh, this works."
I mean, I was dubious of the idea to begin with. I was pushing really hard to do an in-person chemistry read but I was in London, and Taylor, you were like all over the United States, and it just only
I was
worked
just like,
out.
this is not happening. But I was fortunate enough to make a lot of things during COVID, and felt this responsibility to make things so that my like crews that I love had jobs. And so you realize there's a lot you can tell. I mean, there's obviously nothing like being in a room with actors, but there is so much you can get.
I will admit that I was dubious, and I ended up being proven wrong on that, because I think that one of the things.
Can we just go back? Let's just use that as the
No. I take that back. I never said that. It's possible I might have been wrong. No. It's possible I might have been wrong. We're looking into it. I'll let you know.
Okay, Mr.
It's tough. It's tough to be on Zoom with another actor, because even just in a conversation with a friend or something like this, there's always that bit of a lag. And when you're in person acting, it's just so much easier, because you get to play off each other right away, opposed to having that maybe half a second, that moment that you're like, did they say something? Did they add something? And you're like afraid to look away, because when you are acting, like, or when you are talking to someone, you're not always looking directly at them. You're looking to the side and you're like gesturing. And so when you're on Zoom with somebody, you're like, did they just go? Or is it my turn? Okay, no, go ahead. So then there's also like a little bit of a like that, I think enhances the play a bit, and especially with this kind of project where there were a lot of comedic elements, where it kind of broke the ice a bit quicker, because nothing was perfect.
Yeah, there's an awkwardness that is the same as when you meet someone in real life. And so and I think, didn't you and Nick talk on the phone briefly very early on?
No, that was just.
You didn't. Oh, I thought we were trying to. You were supposed to, and then he was like filming Bottoms or something.
Yeah.
But it worked out. So.
The first time I think you two were in a room together was when we did our first rehearsal, right? The thing that we were very fortunate enough to get was 2 weeks of rehearsals, which is like unheard of.
Yeah.
And
he went to shake my hand, and I gave him a hug. I was like, "Come on, dude! Like we're getting into something pretty intense for the next 3
rehearsals
months."
rehearsals got cut down because of COVID.
I got sick for
everything.
the week.
Because then you got sick. But it was the last couple of days. But I'll be honest with you, like I could see it on the Zoom. And then when they got into a room together to start rehearsing, it was pretty instantaneous. Like and whether or not it was, some actors will just decide to get along because that's just a smart thing to do, right? And it's like, we'll figure out each other's personalities later. Let's just leap to best friends, and then we'll fill in the blanks later. These two just like from the moment I was like, "Can we rehearse, please?" And it was really fun to see how excited they were to start working on the film. And those 2 weeks, I think, cemented what we suspected was there. And it really let it blossom. So by the time we got on set for the first scene, which was the scene in the French bistro, these two had 2 weeks of a history together, 2 weeks of, figuring things out, 2 weeks of just talking about, what did you do yesterday? Oh, I did this, and getting to know each other. And there was this ease that they naturally had that we were then very fortunate enough to then tease out. And so I think the chemistry was natural and the chemistry was evident from the beginning. And then Amazon and Sarah, Sarah and Greg fought for the right to just spend 2 weeks in a room, like tinkering. And it was like that, all those things combined, you see on screen.
We're also just very lucky, I will say, that our cast was like filled with just lovely humans,
Yeah.
and it's not always the case, but like we just had such great, and everyone loved the book. And there's so many dog-eared copies of the book laying around set, and just I think everyone was excited to be a part of
Taylor carried a copy of the book around like this, like a Talmudic scholar. He was like, it was dog-eared, it was highlighted.
And then had everyone sign it. And
yeah, that's right.
The cool part was, like, to Sarah's point, one of our camera ops who was on Love Actually, he said this was the best set I've been on since I was on that project.
No, it was about time. It was about time. Remember? Or maybe it was somebody else. Oh no, you're right.
Let's say Love Actually. We love
it. Was
that.
Love Actually,
so
but I'll take About Time as well with someone else.
The driver, it was one of the drivers too. He said that. He was like, the last time I was on a set this happy was About Time. Again, Richard Curtis. Wow. So obviously, maybe he should have directed it.
That's a good thought. I'm gonna file that away. But no,
I really do that.
And then also, like, Nick had fan art where he was like trying to match his hair color to the fan art. Because then we just felt this responsibility to Casey and to the fans of the book to really deliver for them.
Yeah, so that was kind of what I wanted to get into, is that the pressure of adapting beloved IP. I mean, because this book, for me, one of my best friends and I have been texting about it for years. So like when we heard that it was becoming a movie, like we were talking about it for so long. So, and then there's millions of those people. So I guess, how did you kind of venture between that pressure to, one, make the fans happy, two, make the author happy, and also make something that's your own? Because there is something that you want to make it unique.
I think the fact that we were all fans of the book helped. And I think especially for Matthew, who, writing and kind of capturing the tone as the director, I think it was always in service of the book because he loved the book. And I think you can feel that, I think, among everyone.
I knew that there was no way I wasn't going to disappoint fans of the book with some decision I made, whether or not it was to sort of choose to exclude things from the book or change things from the book. I knew that small disappointments were inevitable, but I was willing to risk those in order to create sort of like a much more broad and macro enjoyment of the film by the fans. I was like really protecting the ultimate experience. The thing that I kept coming back to was, you know, this thing is going to look different from the book. This thing is going to operate different from the book. But what was most important to me is at the end of the film, people had the same feeling that they had at the end of the book, right? I wanted to, even though the journey was going to be slightly different, I wanted people to finish the film feeling the exact same way they did when they finished reading the book. And that, for me, the feelings behind the book, recapturing for myself the feelings that I had the first time I read it, that's what I was going for.
No, and I think for Greg Berlanti and I have both been really fortunate to work on so many things that have beloved underlying material, whether it's comic books or so. I think we just really take that seriously. It's part of why I think we read as many people as we do, is really trying to capture that. Like casting Riverdale was equally difficult and required like so much thought and care. So it's like anytime people have ideas in their heads of what the cast is supposed to be or how it's supposed to feel, you know, you want to challenge that. It's a different medium. You want it to have its own life, its own soul. But I think if you start from a place of fandom, it's a lot easier to at least, and then also to be able to defend the changes, right?
I think too, and again, going back to the casting as well, it's like everybody had their idea about who Alex and Henry were, who Henry and Alex should be played by. And I knew that, again, like all of these opinions were present, but they were not as important to me as our instincts and our gut when we put Taylor and Nick together. And for the longest time, until I started to get to know them on set, I couldn't think of them other than as Alex and Henry. They really did become those characters in ways that you just sort of you pray that that's going to happen when you make something like this. And so that too, of just sort of everybody has a million different ideas in their minds about who these characters are, but you only have the opportunity to present one version of it. We were very fortunate that the version that we shared with the world was a version that really made sense, both in terms of our needs as filmmakers and as the needs of the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And Taylor, I mean, for you, can you talk a little bit about the pressure? Did you feel the pressure to be this character that, I mean, no matter who reads the book, you're going to imagine these characters different. That's part of reading and why we all love it. So did you feel that as well?
Totally. But it was so helpful having the book almost as a Bible and then having Matthew's script as a second Bible. Like that's the main Bible, which is Matthew's script. But then being able to go back to that source material and kind of reference
Good save,
it.
Taylor. Good save.
Because when you're on set, the script is Bible, and that's what you have to go by. And it doesn't matter what was in the book because we're choosing to tell in this hour and what was it, Matthew, 3-hour movie? No,
the first cut might have been.
In this like
Man,
2-hour film.
if I ever regret saying anything in an interview in my life, it's that. Yeah.
And so we're very lucky because as an avid reader, I do see adaptations and I go, oh gosh, this was a bad adaptation. I didn't hold up to the book. I prefer the book. And I think Casey and I were in an interview the other day and they were saying, well, they were commenting on all the little idiosyncratic things that Alex does, his little isms. And I'd never heard anyone talk about it. And I was so grateful that they had said something because I did reread the book and try so hard to find those little specific things that Alex would do that personally as an actor is so much fun because it gives you all those extra little details to think about and focus on. But it also gives the fans that it's kind of tantalizing because you're like, oh my gosh, I knew Alex would do that. I knew Henry would do that. And that's so Alex. And it's funny, like in Instagram comments, people will send me screenshots of like, this is so Alex coded. And I'm like, it's not, this is not Alex coded. But it cracks me up because you kind of bring those things into the character that are so specific that the readers really pick up on. And I was so grateful that Casey mentioned that because as an actor, you never want to talk about, the craft and the process because it just kind of sounds a little bit too extra, I would say. And then when they brought it up, I was pleasantly surprised because Nick and I really tried really hard to have these conversations with each other about, do you think they would do this in this moment? How would they? And Matthew was right there with us going, yes, 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 no, no, no. I think, well, let's discuss that. And Sarah and Bree from Amazon, like it was incredible to have such a collaborative process where everybody it was just as invested as you. Like it wasn't just a paycheck. It wasn't just like a notch in their belt. It was, they knew how much this project meant to them and how much it would mean to the world, and we had to do this right.
I also just think like in this business, in the medium of television and film, and especially television, because it's like in your house, it's one of the sort of frustrations is if you do your job really well as a producer, as a writer, as a director, as an actor, it looks really easy. It looks like it wasn't that much work, but it was so much work. And I think, but that's the magic of it, is it shouldn't feel, it should just, you should be able to access the emotion and the comedy and the experience and the adventure. But yeah, it like, so, you know, Taylor, it was, you made choices every second. And but you just made it look really natural. So now, you know, people don't realize how hard it was.
Well, I think the best thing about working with Sarah too is you know what you want and you're very black and white, but you don't take emotion out of it. I think you've done this for such a long time and you're such a pro that you kind of just know what works, but you're not so, when you make a decision, it's not just because I said so, but you allow us to talk through it with you and allow us to understand your process of getting to that conclusion, which a lot of producers don't do. You know, it's either, you know, it's yes, no, and that's it. It's like a parent sometimes, like because I said so.
Taylor and Matthew really want to do this like all in mime and black and white. And so let them play with that and, you know, shoot at least 2 hours before I was like, I don't think this is the best idea, guys.
Oh yes, Roma Part 2.
Yeah, I was definitely doing like Seventh Seal kind of thing. I was doing real, you know, like high contrast, black and white. Yeah.
Matthew, anytime I am prepping to talk to you and I read that this was your directorial debut, I literally have to like remind myself because I don't understand how. And because this was so, it was just so, the storytelling was so well done. So I'm curious for you what the biggest challenge was when you did take that on, because there is a lot of moving parts. And like you guys just said, I mean, it looks so beautiful and effortless on screen, but it's very difficult to make a film. So I'm curious for you what the biggest challenge was.
The first thing I'd say is that thank you, but I think that if you're making your first film, it's an ass kicker no matter what. If you're working on a scale like this or you're working on a scale like this, it's all new. You've never done this before. You're relying on the expertise of the people around you. So I think part of this, the thing that got me through the experience of making the film is that I didn't know how much of a high wire I was actually on compared to maybe the $5 million movie that I could have made as my first film, right? And certainly not the number of eyeballs that were going to be on this because of the popularity of the book. So I had the pleasure of ignorance in many ways about how the film was made. What I will say, and I think it is sort of the answer really is I was surrounded by really talented and experienced people, and we did have a fairly unified vision for the film. You know, it was my responsibility to come in as the director and sort of present this vision, and yet we all sort of, you know, Sarah and I really sort of saw the same pair of eyes, and then where we saw it differently, it was a genuine like exchange of ideas, and you know, like the best idea should win because it's not about our egos, it's about what's right for the film. Yeah, I mean, like the hardest part about making the film, I think, was just learning on the job, right? It was like, it was not, I have enough experience in theater to know that it is perfectly legitimate to say, I don't know. I think the big difference is in theater, you can say, I don't know, and then come up with the answer a week or two later. And on a film set, you have 7 seconds to answer the question. So I think, yeah, it was just learning on the job. But again, you know, you've got this incredible crew. We had an amazing camera crew. We had an amazing cinematographer in Stephen Goldblatt. And it wasn't just Taylor and Nick. Of course, it was Uma Thurman. It was Stephen Fry. It was Cliff. It was Rachel and Sarah Shahi, and I could go on and on. I was given some really great talent to work with, and so I feel like it was like making my first painting and being taken to the best art supply store on earth. And if I was going to fail, I knew I couldn't blame it on anybody but myself.
But I also I think I love working with first-time filmmakers, especially when they're like Matthew and they're obviously so talented, but are willing to say, okay, can we just go over here for a second? Because I don't know what to do right now. Because the worst part is when people are like, I got this, no problem. And they don't, because you're the Pied Piper, you're leading people off a cliff if you're not careful. But I think we were really, first of all, Amazon was amazing. And they let us have more time than, if it had been a director done it a ton of times, which gave us like enough room to find it. And I think we hired really well, right? So Michael Constable was our line producer, and then the crew, and then Stephen, I remember talking to Stephen Goldblatt, our DP, and he'd been teaching at Sundance, and I was like, and he'd worked with Mike Nichols, so he understood theater, and he understood how to help people achieve their potential, which is what Matthew working with the DP, it was the first time he'd had that dynamic in relationship. So just try to find really experienced people who shared the same vision and attitude.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first really gnarly day we had on set, which was New Year's Eve, and it was about a week and a half into filming, and it was there was a huge rainstorm, and it was our COVID tent. It ended up being a super spreader event, but we ended up starting really late because of lots of different issues out of our control, and we just never got ahead, and we just had to push and push and push, and it was just one of those sweat through your shirt, let it dry, sweat through it again kind of day. And I remember at the end of that not fun day, you said to me, Sarah, you learn a valuable lesson in this, in that you have another gear that you can work in. And while it was not fun, and I'm grateful it was only one day out of a 45-day shoot, it was an incredible learning lesson to sort of fail on your feet and still have to go back and keep working. And that Stephen Daldry was one of my huge mentors in my life, making The Inheritance with him. And one of the things that I love about Stephen is he says out loud, he goes, I love being wrong. I love being wrong. Because it keeps your ego in check, and it just sort of annihilates assumptions. And your assumptions are usually the things that make things bad. And it's when you can see that your assumption is wrong and then have to think on your feet to make a new decision based on this new information, it's exciting. You lose a lot of t-shirts, but you end up, usually hopefully doing good work.
Yeah, well, that's what magic is. That's, it's in the exceeded expectations.
With Matthew, some days we would be talking about, he'd say, hey, Taylor, can we talk about what we're doing tomorrow? I say, yeah, sure. So we talk about the setup and everything. And then the next day would come and he would say something different. And I go, wait, didn't we just run through that yesterday? He goes, well, I spoke to Steve. And 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 there
always comes out of that.
Well, yeah, it was a long every single time, and there was no no ego. It was I wanted to do this, but that's gonna take us 45 minutes back, and we have so many setups to shoot today, and so it was always calculating in his mind how to do this the most efficient way without ego and to just get it done. And and as an actor too, you had to go, okay, so just erase what I thought we were doing today and do it again. And when I was I think I was on a SAG panel, and I was talking about working on this project, and I said, you just have to be able to take whatever is thrown at you. You have to get your acting to a level where you're not going to be thrown off when you're giving a different note that you've been practicing for 2 days. That's and that's what Matthew was really strengthening as his first-time director, is just going, okay, pivot, and it's just really cool to see.
I know we're almost out of time, and I want to kind of just wrap up by asking if there's anything specific that you learned on this project that you will take to future projects, including the sequel.
Oh my God. I think you learn every day. That's what's fun about it.
Yeah. You know, I think the biggest thing I learned from making this film, especially when you're making this kind of film, is that this kind of movie making especially is about the heart, and it's about these two characters. And these, you got to find the thing that it's about. And you have to find not just what it's about story-wise or thematically, you have to understand what the engine of the thing is. And the engine of this film was Taylor and Nick and those two characters. And we learned that in writing it. So many scenes just went, if they're not in it, they don't belong. So many scenes went in the editing process. If it doesn't directly influence their story, it's out of the film. I think that there is a kind of essentialism that I learned making this film, even on a big film like this, that essentialism in storytelling, especially in film, will carry you through, and you have to just sort of figure out what that essential element is.
I would say one thing that I really focused on that I'm continuing to take on is the showing and not telling aspect of storytelling. And also understanding that, like, kind of piggybacking on Matthew, is it's not about you personally. Like, whatever you're bringing onto this set, like, leave it at the door, because once you get in your trailer, get through hair and makeup, and get on set, it is all about the characters. Everything you do is in service of the characters, the story, and the film as a whole. And if you're in this industry for any other reason than that, you can have a tough time.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. Sarah, how about you?
I think you learn on everything that you do, and which is great. And if you stop learning, that's a problem. But I'd say something I learned on this film is, like, is to protect that core essential, kind of like the eternal flame of what the project is, because it continues to evolve. Like what Matthew and I thought the project was when we were before prep. We're just looking at a screenplay is different than once you're prepping it, once you're making it. And then when you're in post, you're redefining, you have to re-envision what all your expectations were. So I think you just have to hold fast to the essential truth of it, which is another way of saying what I think Taylor and Matthew said. But I think also just like work with talented people. That's not a genius insight, but it really helps.
It really helps.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. And congrats again on Red, White, and Royal Blue.
Thanks,
you.
Emily.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Melanie McFarland, Senior Critic for Salon.com. And today I'm your host for Half Hour with Red, White, and Royal Blue. And today it's my pleasure to have a conversation with Sarah Schechter, producer of the film, along with her producing partner, Greg Berlanti of Berlanti Schechter Films. Sarah, it's so nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I would love for you to give people an overview of what Red, White, and Royal Blue is about.
Red, White, and Royal Blue is based on the New York Times bestseller book of the same name by the fabulous Casey McQuiston. And it is a love story about a closeted son of a British prince who falls in love, quite to his shock, with the son of the first female president of the United States. And hilarity and obstacles ensue.
As they do with all rom-coms, right?
Yes.
All right. So before we begin our conversation, let's watch a trailer. So as you were saying, this is based on Casey McQuiston's novel, and it is so beloved by readers. And I'm curious to know, did the story come to you, or did you read it and then decide that you wanted to make it into a movie?
I read the book before it was published. So before it was a bestseller, my executive, Mike McGrath, who's an executive producer on the film, read it first and kind of came into my office and was sort of like, this book is really fun. It's really good. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't even want to email you though about what it's about because it's very steamy and I don't know if that's like proper for a work email. So I immediately read it, and then my producing partner Greg Berlanti also read it, and we all just loved it. And we kind of teamed up with Amazon to go after it. A lot of people are going after the manuscript, which happens often in Hollywood before books are published. It's very speculative. You're betting on other people sharing your opinion of a book before it's kind of in the world. But we just loved the story and the writing, and met with Casey, and the rest is history. We're very, very fortunate that they picked us to be the producers to adapt their book, which we just loved so much because there were a lot of people that shared our love.
Yes. And what was it about the story for you that really made you say, okay, I have to make this into a film?
I mean, I think that emotionally, it was just a riveting story. I think so often you're looking for a story that you feel like you haven't seen before, but that feels universal. And so to me, the story of like the obstacles that stand between two people being able to be together is, I mean, that's the stuff of so many great films, right? From the beginning of film and certain literature. So this, though, felt like a fresh spin. The stakes felt very real. They felt like real, like sometimes romantic comedies, I feel like the problems just seem like it's like, just call each other, just talk about that. It's like they don't, for me, feel genuine enough. And you want to root for a couple. You want to feel like they belong together, but there are things keeping them apart. And in this case, the stakes of world politics and privacy and responsibility to family and country, those were real stakes. Those were real problems that they had to face separately and together. So that for me was really exciting. And then intellectually, politically, I just really loved that I hadn't seen a story like this about two young men. And it was so joyful. So that was, I think, exciting for us because, Greg, his entire career has been really focused on expanding the aperture of who gets to be at the center of a story. And so I think this was just a continuation of that.
We have seen this revival in rom-coms. And whenever there's a revival, there's a certain format to all movies, as you know. There's certain expectations of different obstacles, as you were talking about, particularly in rom-coms and how they might happen. I wonder if part of the reason people have attached to this is because we have so much more of an awareness of what obstacles are like for couples in real life, or people in real life, and especially in public life. And I'm specifically, as an example, thinking about how much more we know about the royal family thanks to the exposure that Harry and Meghan have given us. So can you talk a little bit about that, and just in the context of what this romance, how this romance might speak to it in your view?
It's always been great fodder because the drama, the stakes of it, and certainly the consequence. And I think you think about like Wallace Simpson, you think like there's just, it feels like the romantic choices are become of international. I mean, it goes back to when, princesses were married off to other royal families to create peace. So there is this history among political families that their romantic lives also belong to the state. And that they have like this sort of oversized, enormous impact. So I think that that's where this was such a smart setting for a story like this.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it also goes back to, all of this really hangs on casting that hero romance, right? And you have this wonderful pairing with Taylor Zakhar Perez as Alex Claremont Diaz, and of course, Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Henry. And let's talk about that. Like, what is it when you saw them? What was it in their chemistry that you said, oh yes, this is who we want to play these parts?
Yeah, I think that when you're casting, and Greg and I have been very lucky to do across many genres adaptations of beloved source material. I find that it's a really intensive casting process because you're you realize how many expectations you bring in watching these casting tapes of what you think it is. And then it's also thinking about, well, what would Casey think? What would their opinion be? What would the fans be? What is it that is truly, because you have a book, it's more than just 120 pages of dialogue, right? You have such a deeper sense of who the character is. So we really had an extensive casting process, which we tend to do. And the first person we cast was Nick. And Nick was Greg's idea. He had seen him in something else, and he had that sort of the soulfulness. Henry is a character, Prince Henry, who Nick plays, is like very soulful, very emotional, very internal, very intellectual, very scared and afraid of the world, and feels like this deep fear that he can't be who he wants to. It's not even a deep fear. He accepts it as a truth. So we needed an actor that could communicate so much of the internal of Henry, whereas Alex is very external. Alex will tell you everything he's thinking. He's been encouraged. He grew up in a very different kind of family. And so he's obviously like aware of politics. He's aware of like bigger issues than just himself. But he and Henry are such an interesting match because they're so different, but have like shared really rare experience of being in the public eye. So Taylor has that sort of gregarious, he's so incredibly sweet, he's very friendly, he's very charismatic and charming and funny, and so they're just like, it was trying to find kind of some of those core essential elements of the characters that these actors were able to access and bring to the fore. So we were lucky. And then when we finally did a Zoom chemistry reading between them, Matthew López, the co-writer, director, executive producer, and I just kind of breathed like a deep sense of relief that like, okay, I think we got this.
Yeah. And then of course you have, I've watched so much of Sarah Shahi's work over the years. She's amazing. You also have Stephen Fry and Uma Thurman. These are some heavy hitters, and Clifton Collins Jr. All of these people. So you said you cast the leads first, and then how about bringing in these other folks?
We were just so lucky to get Stephen, and then Uma. I'm such a huge. I had a Pulp Fiction poster in my room, so the idea of Uma is such an icon. And but for Ellen, you really needed someone that you had the gravitas, the charisma, and the believability of having that kind of position of being the president of the United States and the first female president of the United States, and kind of a fierceness and a toughness, but a softness. And so I think we've just seen all of that in Uma. It's funny, we were doing like a Q&A a while ago, and Uma talked about how she hasn't had the opportunity to play a good mother very often. And I was sort of like, afterwards, I was like, how dare you? The mother in Kill Bill is a great mother. Look at what she does for her kids. The kind of like badge of quality that having Uma in a supporting role brought to the film, it kind of qualified the production in a certain way. And I think we were all so excited. And then Sarah Shahi is a genius. So fun. That was Rich D'Elia, one of our casting directors, had worked with Sarah. And as soon as we started casting, he's like, this is Sarah Shahi. You guys can talk about whoever you want, but like, this has to be Sarah Shahi. And he was so right.
You were talking about Uma, and you were talking about the fact that she said this is a great maternal role. And I think this is a great time for us to throw to what is one of my favorite clips, one of my favorite scenes from the movie. So much going on with that conversation that I just love. There's the whole connection that we see, but there's this compulsion that we see to her to rewind, to redo the talk, which is something that you would expect from someone who is running the country, making sure that all bases are covered. Can you kind of take us through like the background of how that scene, played out? The perspective.
Well, this scene really speaks also to Matthew López's genius. Because what's funny is there's a line early on in that scene where it says, like, if I had more time, I could have done a PowerPoint presentation, because there is a beloved and wonderful scene that Casey wrote in the book that was sort of Alex doing, like there was a PowerPoint presentation. And so there's a lot of talk, like we spoke a lot about, Matthew and I and Mike and Greg, about not doing that scene because it was so iconic, but letting, this was the scene that the movie kind of wanted and needed, and like rhythmically this kind of quiet moment. And obviously there's comedy in it, but there's a lot of heart and emotion. And I think this, like, Matthew has talked about how he really wanted to write a character who was really comfortable and empathetic to an understanding of the specifics of being a gay man or a bi man. And you know, I think for me, the most powerful part of that scene is, I mean, all of it's beautiful and it's so beautifully acted by both of them, is when she says, "And that's on me." Because I think that so often queer youth feel this responsibility and this idea that actually it's the parents' job to meet the kid where they are, you know. And Greg actually directed the movie Love, Simon, that has an equally beautiful scene with Jen Garner, and another one with Josh, and you know, those scenes I think are so important because you're not just creating a safe space for queer youth, you're creating an opportunity for parents of queer youth to see a model of behavior that they probably, many of them, look, I'm sure many of them achieve on their own, and others don't know what the right words are. So to be given that example and to be shown what it's like to just be loved and accepted for who you are. But for me, I think that's one of the most powerful parts of that scene, is that moment where she says, "And that's on me for making those assumptions." Because I think that's what so much of the pain, you know, and there's still the mental health tax of our world not being as accepting as it should be or could be, that is placed on kids. It's just to kind of remind parents of their responsibilities and their opportunities. And so that to me was like, this whole movie is very joyful, and we made it during a very dark time in American history and in the world. And so, you know, sometimes you just want to show people the world you want to live in. And you kind of make it so, and you create that reality. So this idea of a mother whose response is like, "Of course I love you. You got to think about this because of the stakes of the situation, but also like how that was, I can't believe I just assumed." So I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and to your point, I do think that having this story within the context of a rom-com, which is that comfort, really adds to the power of that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you and Greg had those conversations about not just adapting the novel and hitting the beats to, you know, to serve the fans, but also to take this moment and have a queer romance, a queer love story within this format that has for such a long time been centered on, you know, cisgender couples.
Yeah.
Did you have a conversation?
It's twofold. It's one, it's like, you know, growing up not having seen these examples, how incredible it is to create that space for the next generation and for them to feel, because look, not every queer kid's parents are as wonderful as Ellen Claremont Diaz, you know? And so it also for them, it's like oh, look, these are the kind of parents I deserve, you know? And if I don't have them, maybe it's not my fault. Maybe it's their limitations. And so but it's also just good storytelling. You know, I've been having this argument for most of my career that when you have diverse representation, that's good business. I mean, you are giving more people the chance to see themselves, which makes them want to watch. I mean, it really, to me, is so simple. It's also more interesting. I mean, how many like cisgendered white upper middle class rom-coms have we seen? And there are many that I love. And the truth is like the what's underneath them is a universality. But why not? But there's a universality for there's a lot of cisgendered people that love this movie and love this book. And so they can access the universality that's at the heart of it. And I think all movies and television shows at their best are giving us this kind of tapping into this universality of the human experience. But why not do it in a way that feels fresh? It's also more interesting, honestly. Like the consequences and the stakes are so real in this movie. As fun and as light as it is, there's real obstacles to overcome, and that's just fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. And I do love the fact that you do have this couple at the center, and there aren't other competing romances. We just focus on them. I did want to just ask the question of, there are a lot of people who are going to be rewatching this, watching it for the first time, returning to that idea of this being a new world. We have, as you see, the first female president in your film, and we have someone who's running for that position now. And I'm wondering, as we look at this, like, does that change anything in terms of your kind of your way of approaching the movie, or your thoughts about, I say this knowing that no pop culture is predictive, right?
Right.
You just kind of
no, but I believe in, like, the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I do believe that we can create the world we want to live in. And if you show people it's possible, for those with less imagination, it's harder to deny it's harder to say something's impossible when you've seen it, even if it's fictional. And I think that, like, the ability to, I think storytelling creates bridges, and it taps into empathy in a way that sometimes can be harder in people's day-to-day lives. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity. So while it's not predictive, I think it's expansive. And I think it helps create it. I actually had the opportunity to meet the woman that last ran for president. And I was telling her about this film, and she said, I said, we had a female president. And she goes, oh, well, I love that. And I said, and she turned Texas blue, and Hillary Clinton said, one of my first jobs in the field was in Texas. And if every college age kid in Texas registered to vote and voted, you could turn Texas blue, and that to me was really inspiring. And so for me, I'm very excited. I think, though, that the reason to watch this movie, if you haven't seen it, is because it's joyful. And it makes you feel good without feeling like manipulated or talked down to. It's a genuine journey that these characters that are fun to watch, and it's a glorious, gorgeous film that was really well directed by Matthew López, and all of our key crew were fantastic at their jobs. And it's a great place to go spend a couple hours, and it'll make you feel good. And feeling good is feeling hopeful, feeling joyful. These are not feelings to minimize. I think there's a real value in that. So if you had a hard day, go watch these two guys kind of try to figure out the situation, and they don't initially like each other, and they find a common ground, and they have a lot of preconceived notions about each other. And it's funny, and it's joyful, and it's heartfelt, and it's made with a lot of love and respect, and comes from Casey McQuiston's their genius mind and their heart. And so I think it's just, I think it's if you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor. And you don't have to be queer to relate to this story. And and certainly if you have, I've talked to so many parents whose kids love this movie. Sometimes they're younger than I would think would be appropriate, but they've watched it over and over again, because I think it's just showing them that they can be happy. And I think for all of us to give ourselves permission to be happy, and to see a reflection of happiness and possibility and positivity in a world that's felt dark for a long time, I think it's a really valuable addition to any conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you were saying with Casey, they completely made this beautiful story. There are characters in there that I know that you have combined and things like that. Can you talk a little bit before we kind of wind things up about that whole notion of honoring the text material to, just to make sure the fans are being served, and making sure that it's your own vision?
Yeah. Well, it is. It's so interesting. I've been involved in a lot of adaptations, and I will say, for me, the most important audience is the author, right? So it's like, I did the show The Flight Attendant, and Chris loved it. It was very different, but he loved it. I think you can never capture the experience of one medium in another medium. You have to extract the essential oils of it, the things that feel, you want to create the emotional experience that you felt with a book or a comic book or whatever. And so I think we're really, the good news about this adaptation was everyone involved was a fan of the book. And Matthew was a huge fan. Greg and I, Mike, our cast. I mean, we felt a responsibility to the book, to Casey, and to the book's fans, because they're really beautiful fans of this book. And so, like when Nick was dyeing his hair blonde in prep, it was like he had fan art that he was showing our brilliant key hair person, Karen, of like the color he wanted it to be. So we all felt like we were bringing to life something that existed very specifically in a lot of people's minds, but you have 2 hours. It's just not as much time. So you do have to make those hard choices, and also like good on Casey, because the what you're referring to is we did combine 2 characters, and that was before the movie came out. There were some very angry tweets about that and suspicion, but I think we're the overwhelming the majority of people that loved the book, that watched the movie, understood and respected those differences. And again, they were done with, like, Matthew did it with a lot of thoughtfulness and respect for the text. I think because he comes from the theater, there's a lot of respect for the text. And so, but you have 2 hours. You can't do everything. And what's great about that is now if you watch the movie and you love it, go read the book. There's new stuff.
So we have Red, White, and Royal Blue 2 coming.
Yes, we are. We are knee deep in working on the adaptation. It's been a lot of fun. Casey is co-writing with Matthew. So it's been though really fun experience, because it's interesting because there's no book to work off of, but there is Casey's own internal truth of kind of who the characters are and how they would behave. So it's been so fun to get to spend that time with Casey, being like, well, do we think Alex and Henry would maybe do this? And like, what would be an issue? And so it's been really fun and a unique development experience, because the text has sort of not been written yet. We're adapting something that doesn't exist. So it's been really fun and interesting and a challenge. And we feel, again, like this sort of tremendous responsibility, but these characters are just the idea. Look, I'm lucky enough to work on a lot of television. What's great about television, you fall in love with a character, you get to keep seeing them. So this idea that we have these beautiful, incredible cast and this like wonderful story and world that this takes place in, and we get to go back, like, what a gift.
Well, this has been such a treat, and thank you so much for talking to me. And we always ask this question to finish, but in case someone hasn't had a chance to watch Red, White, and Royal Blue, is there one thing about the film that stands out for you that you would want someone to check out?
First of all, if you haven't seen it, how lucky. Now you get to watch it for the first time and join the rest of us, hopefully as a fan of the film. But I think it's about love and hope, and who couldn't use a little more of that in this world?
Especially right now. I can't wait to introduce people to it. Well, thank you so much to our friends at Prime Video and to Sarah for joining us today. And to everyone watching, thank you so much. And see you next time on Half Hour With.